To my 3 daughters, my father said, raising his glass. Claire, Becca, and Sasha. 40 people clapped, candles flickered. My wine glass was already lifted. My name is Nadia. There is no Sasha in our family. I waited for the correction. It never came. So I set my glass down, and I left. What he didn't know was that the lake house he was toasting in wasn't his anymore. Stay with me. Because 3 days later, he asked me for something he no longer controlled. My name is Nadia Voss. I was 34 the night my father erased me in a room full of witnesses. Not accidentally, not confused, not slipping on a name. He said 3 daughters. We are 4. And he felt complete. The lake house stood on the eastern edge of Edinburgh Lake. Peeling white siding, copper pots in the kitchen that were decorative, never used. A long dining table my mother polished before every gathering like it was proof of something. They loved hosting there, loved the image, loved the idea of family assembled under warm lighting. What they didn't love was unpredictability, and I was always unpredictable to them, because I didn't need them the way my sisters did. I had driven 6 hours to be there, left my own home at 9:40 a.m., stopped once for gas, once for coffee, arrived at 3:52 p.m., helped fold napkins, arranged centerpieces, did the quiet daughter work. Then came the toast, the performance moment. My mother stood beside him, beaming. He raised the glass, named Claire, named Becca, named Sasha, smiled, sat down, no correction, no flicker, no hesitation. I didn't interrupt, because correcting him would have made me the problem. Again. I set my glass down carefully. The way you set something down when you've made a decision. Picked up my bag, walked out. Nobody noticed until my chair was empty. The drive home was silent, except for the memory replaying in precise detail. Tone, cadence, timing, the way Aunt Renata glanced at her plate, the way my sister pretended not to hear it. By the time I reached the rest stop near Irwin at 11:04 p.m., I wasn't hurt. I was done. The next morning, I opened the folder I had been avoiding. The lake house deed. 5 years earlier, my grandmother Vera had died. She left the property in thirds to her 3 children. My mother, my uncle, my aunt. 4 years ago, my uncle wanted out, needed cash. My mother called me. Said the property would fall into the wrong hands if I didn't step in, said family needed me. I bought his share. $94,040, signed, recorded. For 5 years, I paid 1/3 of taxes, 1/3 of maintenance, 1/3 of insurance. But here's the detail my father forgot. 2 years ago, my aunt moved to Arizona permanently. She transferred her share to me, quietly. Simple quitclaim deed. Signed, filed, which meant? At the moment my father gave that toast, I owned 2/3 of that house. He owned nothing. They had invited me into a property I legally controlled, and forgotten. 3 days after the dinner, my phone rang. It was my father. Your mother is upset, he began. She feels you overreacted to being erased. I need you at Claire's birthday next month, he continued. We're short on the deposit. There it was, the real reason for the toast. He didn't call to apologize. He called to invoice. We've put down $1,400, he said. Total will be around $6,000. We need help covering it. I leaned back in my kitchen chair, looked at the deed copy in front of me. Why don't you sell the lake house? I asked calmly. Silence. What? You don't own it, I replied. I do. No, I said evenly. You own 1/3. I own 2. He didn't believe me, which made sense. They never read what I signed. They just assumed I would fund what they wanted. I have the deed in front of me, I said. It was recorded June 17th, 2 years ago. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Assert ownership? Refuse payment? Stop performing? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, Because what he was really asking was, would I finally stop playing the role they wrote for me? If someone ever left you out of a room on purpose, you already know the answer. You wouldn't, my father repeated, the way people repeat something when they hope repetition changes reality. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I already did, I said quietly. Silence stretched across the line, not confusion, calculation. Send me a copy, he said finally. It wasn't a request, it was an attempt to regain footing. I will, I replied, and I'll CC your attorney. He hung up. Within an hour, my mother texted, "What are you trying to prove?" Nothing. That was the truth. I wasn't proving anything. I was acknowledging ownership. I emailed a certified copy of the deed, time-stamped, recorded with the county, clear, unambiguous. That afternoon, my Aunt Carol from Arizona called. "Nadia, I thought they told you." "Told me what?" "That your father refinanced the house last year." My stomach went cold. Refinanced. That requires collateral. "He listed the property as sole controlling interest," she continued. "I signed my transfer years ago. I assumed he updated filings. He hadn't. He couldn't. Because 2/3 was no longer his, which meant he had secured a loan against property he didn't control, and I now controlled the majority interest in the collateral. I requested the lien filing from the county. There it was, a $220,000 line of credit secured against the lake property, filed under my father's name, signed 18 months after my aunt's transfer. He hadn't forgotten. He had ignored it. When he called back that evening, his tone was different. "You're going to ruin this family," he said. "No," I replied evenly. "You leveraged property you didn't own. You never objected. You never asked." There's a difference. Claire's birthday was 3 weeks away. The deposit deadline was in 5 days. My mother sent a long message about unity, about forgiveness, about perception. They weren't worried about the birthday. They were worried about exposure. Because if the refinancing came under review, the bank would reevaluate collateral, and majority control mattered. The next Sunday, they scheduled a family conversation at the lake house. Of course they did. They assumed proximity gave them leverage. I arrived at 4:03 p.m. The same driveway, the same porch, the same dining table. My father was already seated at the head. My mother stood behind him, Claire near the window. A lawyer I didn't recognize sat beside my father. I didn't bring emotion. I brought the deed. "You're overcomplicating this," my father began. "We need cooperation." "You need compliance," I corrected calmly. The unfamiliar lawyer introduced himself. Thomas Riley, representing Gerald Voss. He slid a document toward me. A settlement proposal. He would buy my 2/3 share at the 2019 valuation, $94,040. Exactly what I paid. No appreciation, no adjusted value. I almost smiled. They still thought I was the naive one. "The current appraisal is $334,000, I said quietly. 2/3 is $222,666. Claire inhaled sharply. My father's jaw tightened. "You don't need that money." I held his gaze. "You don't decide what I need." "Additionally," I continued, "the refinancing lien must be addressed." His lawyer stiffened. "Refinancing is a separate matter." "No," I said evenly. "It's a majority collateral issue." The air in the room shifted. My mother's composure cracked slightly. "Can't you just let this go?" she whispered. That phrase again, let it go. Be smaller, be quiet, be convenient. I folded my hands on the table. "You stood up in front of 40 people and erased me. You leveraged property you didn't own. And now you want me to subsidize another event." I looked at Claire. "This isn't about a birthday. It's about who controls the table." Silence. Heavy. Final. My father leaned back. "You'll force foreclosure." "No," I said calmly. "I'll force transparency." The lawyer cleared his throat. We can renegotiate. Good. That was the first rational sentence spoken all evening. The word renegotiate hung in the air like something fragile. My father didn't like that word. Renegotiation implies equality. He had never treated me as equal in that house. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. If we restructure the lien, he began carefully, and refinance under proper ownership proportions, the exposure decreases. Exposure. There it was again. They weren't worried about birthdays. They were worried about discovery. I didn't rush to answer. Silence works. People reveal more when they try to fill it. My mother stepped in first. Nadia, this doesn't have to be hostile. It isn't, I said evenly. It's documented. Claire looked between us. Is this really about the toast? She asked softly. No, I replied. It's about pattern. You don't forget a daughter accidentally. The room went still again. My father spoke carefully this time. What do you want? The question landed differently now. Not as control, as concession. I want the refinancing corrected, I said calmly. I want the lien restructured to reflect majority ownership. And I want acknowledgement. Acknowledgement of what? He asked. That I exist. That was the first emotional sentence I had allowed myself, and it hit harder than the legal ones. My father's shoulders dropped. For the first time in that house, he looked older, not defensive, not angry, just tired. I made a mistake, he said quietly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't theatrical. It was small, but it was real. My mother blinked. Claire exhaled slowly. The lawyer nodded once. Because admission changes negotiation. The restructuring paperwork began that week. The lien was amended. The bank refiled collateral under correct percentages. The credit line was adjusted. The leverage balanced. I didn't sell my share. I didn't demand buyout. I didn't burn the house down, because ownership wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. 3 weeks later, Claire's birthday dinner happened. Smaller, more modest, no inflated deposits, no emergency funding calls. At the end of the evening, my father stood again, raised his glass, paused, looked directly at me. To my daughters, he said, Claire, Becca, and Nadia. The room clinked glasses. No laughter, no confusion, no ghost names. He got it right. That didn't fix everything. It didn't erase years. It didn't magically create intimacy. But it corrected the count. And sometimes, that's where healing actually begins. If someone ever left you out of the narrative on purpose, remember this: you don't have to shout. You don't have to storm out. You just have to stop letting other people decide the seating chart.